Good evening, everyone. It is now 19:07, and if everyone could please have a seat, thank you very much. I'd like to formally call to order tonight's December 10th public hearing. On the agenda tonight is just two items. First item being the preliminary plan of subdivision number 4, TAC 19003, or better known as docket 19, TAC 11, dealing with Pecan Ridge development. And the second agenda is an internal agenda for the approval of the minutes. I am Michael Bird. I'm the chairman of the Advisory Planning Board. To my left, we have Carl Shuttler, Terry Rogers. To my right, Ms. Lisa Avery. We do have a quorum this evening. And as I stated, tonight's case, the first thing on the docket is the preliminary plan of subdivision 4 TAC 19003. After tonight's hearing, tonight's hearing will be conducted as such. It will be a presentation by the staff, Mr. Joe Minor, then a presentation by the applicant themselves, followed by any questions from the board members here, as well as a public hearing for anyone from the audience that wishes to speak. Please ensure that you sign up on the list in the back so that you can be recognized. After that, any follow-on questions, at which point we will then close the public hearing, query by the board members, in which we will pass a vote. The recommendation of the Advisory Planning Board taken at this hearing will be filed with the City Council, who will make the final and ultimate decision, on behalf of the city, that is. Any person of record may appeal the decision of the Advisory Planning Board to the City Council within 15 days after notice of the board's recommendation. The hearing tonight will involve a presentation, as I stated, by the staff, followed by a presentation by the applicant, at which point the board members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the staff and the applicant following their presentations. The board will then also have an opportunity to ask questions of those who spoke during the hearing. Board members will be polled for their comments, if any, prior to a motion. And at this time, as I stated, is there anyone here tonight who would like to speak on behalf of our first agenda item, the preliminary plan of subdivision? Please stand up and raise your right hand. All those that are speaking, give. Okay, yes, sir. Yeah, I recognize you, sir. Okay, please, I'm sorry. Do you swear or affirm that the statements that you are about to give are true to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief? I do. Okay, thank you very much. Please have a seat. This time I will then turn it over to Mr. Joe Minor for staff's presentation, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. I'm Joe Minor, the City of Bowie Planning Director. I'm here to present the staff recommendation for preliminary plan 4-19003 for Pecan Ridge. A couple of slides that I have just to move forward here. Let's see. Okay, this property is located up near Old Town Bowie. It's located at the end of Lloyd Station Road. It's circled up there in blue. The property is about 50 or 42 acres in size. The property is currently in an abandoned agricultural use, a couple of houses previously used as a horse farm. You can see the end of old Laurel Bowie Road, which is now Lloyd Station Road, and Maryland 197 on the left center portion of the picture, and the WB&A trail runs from the upper right-hand corner of the slide to the lower middle corner. So that's the existing WB&A trail. So this property abuts the trail. This is a picture that shows you the existing city limits of Bowie. The property that's under review tonight is not located in the city, but it's adjacent to the city limits. The city limits are in the purplish color. This is a drawing that just shows some of the site features, including Pecan Grove, which is in the south center portion of the property. It's a mature pecan grove of many pecan trees, and it's going to be preserved as part of this conservation subdivision design. There's also a natural swale area along the northern end of the property. These are some photographs of some of the existing conditions on the site. This was submitted as part of the conservation sketch plan. To the west of the property, in the bottom left-hand slide, is the Pepco power lines. This is a picture of the conservation subdivision layout, which was certified by the Park and Planning Commission. It does provide the required amount of 40%, 60% of open space and 40% of conservation lot. This is the concept plan, the woodland and wildlife concept plan that goes with that. The preliminary plan itself is made up of a couple of sheets. This is the overall map. The plan is 80 lots, one access point coming in from Old Laurel Bowie Road or Lloyd Station Road, series of cul-de-sacs. The minimum lot size in this type of subdivision is 6,000 square feet. This slide shows the WB&A trail along the bottom of the slide. And this is the street section at the entrance. As you come in from Lloyd Station Road, there's a sidewalk on one side, which is a 5-foot wide sidewalk. And then throughout the subdivision, it's made up of 50-foot rights-of-way, which would be comprised of 26 feet of travel lanes and sidewalks on both sides. The traffic study that was submitted from the applicant shows that acceptable levels of service will be achieved at all of the study intersections. And this is a picture of the study intersections that were studied in the traffic impact study. So we have all of this information for the board's review. In terms of the staff report, the county subdivision regulations require that in order for a preliminary plan of subdivision to be approved, there must be a showing that adequate public facilities exist or a program for the area within which the subdivision is located. Also, that the subdivision is designed in accordance with the Woodland Conservation Ordinance. In reviewing the project, we found that the project is consistent with the conservation subdivision design that was approved earlier this year, that adequate public facilities do exist to serve this property and the proposed development of 80 single-family homes, and we've covered that on pages 3 and 4 of the staff report. We also find that the tree conservation plan meets the county's requirements. However, they were recommending some off-site, 1.72 acres of off-site woodland credits, and in accordance with city policy, we recommend that that tree planting take place within the same sub-watershed of the development site or as close to the city as possible. So in conclusion, staff found that the requested preliminary plan 4-19003 does meet the county's requirements for subdivision approval. We recommend approval with 2 conditions, the woodland conservation condition, which I've already discussed, and also a trip cap of 60 a.m. peak hour trips and 72 p.m. peak hour trips for the subject application. And that concludes the staff presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Minor. This time, would the applicant please, if you could, sir, state your name.
Yeah, am I on? We good? Okay, great. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. My name is Edward Gibbs. I am an attorney with offices in Largo, and I'm here this evening representing Caruso Homes. I think this is probably the 4th time that we've been out to the city. I do think probably our first time before you, perhaps, but on other occasions, we had a stakeholders meeting and we've had 2 presentations that we've made before the mayor and council. Let me take a moment, if I might. Caruso Homes is currently not the owner of the property. Caruso Homes is the contract purchaser. The owner is an entity known as Citizens LLC. And, but Caruso's roots go deep in Prince George's County as a home builder and in Maryland in the surrounding DMV and in North Carolina, where they have active projects as well. But the history of Caruso Homes is particularly extensive in Prince George's County. I think they have probably 5 active projects ongoing right now in the county, and they've been in business headed by their president, Mr. Jeff Caruso, since 1986. And I'd like to introduce Mr. Andy Garrett, who is supervising this particular project, seated in the front row, and immediately behind him, Mr. Nick Cintron, also of Caruso Homes. Our civil engineer, Phil Hughes of Rogers Engineering, is here this evening as well, and he's certainly available to answer any questions. First, let me say, I think that Mr. Meinert did a very nice job giving you an orientation. We have reviewed their staff report. We concur with the findings, and we also have no objection to the 2 conditions which have been recommended in the city's staff report. I'm not going to get into so much description of what's on the property today or surrounding uses. That's all covered in Mr. Meinert's staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about it. I want to talk a little bit about the subdivision technique which we're proposing. We are proposing to use what's called a public benefit conservation subdivision. And so in order to use this particular type of subdivision technique, there need to be some significant features which present themselves on the property which warrant carving out individual conservation parcels to be preserved. So there are maybe 5 or 6 different features that you can have. You can have significant physical features on the property. You can have significant environmental features on the property, and those are 2 which we find present themselves here. What happens is, in return for preserving the significant features that warrant being preserved, you then are allowed to use smaller lots. The minimum lot size is 6,500 square feet, but you cannot exceed the theoretical density which you could have gotten if you had just done a conventional subdivision. So this is basically 42 acres of land. It's zoned RR. In the RR zone, the lot size is 20,000 square feet, with an acre of land being 43,000 and some change. You're roughly going to get 2 dwelling units per acre. So under conventional density, you could get a maximum of 80-some lots. We are proposing 80 lots for this subdivision. We're proposing, though, to create conservation parcels, preserve those, and in return, we're using a smaller lotting pattern. That's what it boils down to. So if you look at that plan, you'll see the green areas are the areas which are proposed to be preserved. An extremely unique feature on this property are groves of pecan trees, which date back many years, and they were deemed to be worthy of being saved. In particular, a substantial grove presents itself in the, I would call it the southeast quadrant of the property, down abutting the WB&A trail. And then there are sensitive environmental features running along the northern boundary where you see the other conservation parcel. One of the peculiar things about this subdivision technique is that you have to deed these parcels to a qualifying 501c3 entity that can't be the owner, can't be the developer, and it can't be the HOA. Now, the city would qualify, the Park and Planning Commission would qualify. The Park and Planning Commission has indicated a willingness to take the parcels. We had also been queried by your staff as to the possibility of whether we would be interested in having this property annexed into the city, because it falls within the master plan concept of expansion of the city's boundaries. We had some meetings with your staff. We internally caucused, and my client determined that they would be interested in annexing into the city. So if we, and this is what we've had 2 meetings with the mayor and council on. During the last meeting, the most recent meeting, it was determined that that decision would be made within the context of the city taking action on our preliminary subdivision plan. We remain interested in doing that if the city is interested. If the city's not interested, we understand, and we will just deed the parcels to the Park and Planning Commission. They are qualified to take them. But, you know, the Pecan Grove does present a great opportunity because of its contiguity with the WB&A Trail to present a situation where perhaps some benches could be added to give people using the trail the opportunity to depart from the trail, rest, relax, and enjoy the scenic views. So that's pretty much the technique. We do have a single road. We have a stem of property coming out to meet Lloyd Station Road. That is going to be our access drive. We come in with sort of a serpentine turn on the road. There would be lots on either side as you turn, and then we have a series of 3 cul-de-sacs which would have lots on either side, a total of 80 lots, minimum lot size 6,500 square feet. The access drive itself, as it comes into the property, we have a 50-foot wide right-of-way for that access drive as it just comes through the narrow stem. Once it gets through that stem, it widens out to a 60-foot right-of-way in width with sidewalks on both sides of internal streets. We are and have been working with the Department of Permits, Inspections, and Enforcement, as well as the Department of Public Works and Transportation for Prince George's County. They have indicated to us that they will ultimately approve the entrance road with 22 feet of paving, 2 11-foot travel lanes built within a 50-foot wide right-of-way that will widen out once you get into the property. So that's sort of the orientation. We have adequate public facilities as required by the subdivision ordinance and as determined by virtue of analysis by both the Park and Planning Commission, and of course Mr. Minor included that in his staff report as well. So you know, there are adequate schools, and of course we have the school facility surcharge. Response times are within the norms allowed for the police and fire department. We're going to meet our woodland conservation requirements. There is a very small component that would be met off-site, and we agree with the condition recommended by your staff that, that any off-site planning be as close as possible to the property and to the city. I think one thing that everybody always wants to be concerned about and should be is, of course, transportation impact. And our transportation engineer, the traffic group, met with staff at the Park and Planning Commission. They scoped a study area, which includes 4 different intersections that they had to go out and look at. They looked at the existing levels of service at all 4 of those intersections. They added a 1% just general growth rate on the roads that would carry forward for a period of 3 years. They added in traffic from 2 approved but unbuilt developments, which are called background, of course, and then they generated the trips that would result from the development of these 80 homes. And after taking all of those trips, adding them into the 4 intersections in the scope, all intersections pass. I think there is 1 turning movement during the PM peak hour on Racetrack Road, approaching Lloyd Station, which is level of service D, which is the lowest acceptable, and that's unsignalized, so you do that with seconds of delay. Every other intersection, most of the intersections are A and B, and then some are C. So our transportation engineer found that there would be adequate transportation facilities to accommodate this development. That has been agreed to after review by transportation staff at Park and Planning, by DPI at the county, and more recently, we've just received a letter from the State Highway Administration indicating they take no exception to the findings in the transportation study either. So all of the governmental entities which analyze our transportation impact as a result of our traffic impact study say we provide adequate facilities from a transportation standpoint. So I think that's pretty much all that I have at this point. I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, Mr. Phil Hughes from Rogers is here to respond to any technical engineering questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. And you get a chance to speak.
I have questions for this presentation.
Let's
I don't want
check.
to take my time to speak in answering questions that I have for them. Thank you.
Okay. Do you guys got any questions?
Yeah, what were those 4 intersections once again, please?
Sure. The 4 scoped intersections were 197 and Jericho Park Road, 197 and Racetrack Road, Racetrack Road and Normal School Road, and Racetrack Road at its intersection with Laurel Bowie / 11th Street.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
You had can you repeat what the grade was for the traffic impact? You said the traffic impact,
The level of service?
the level of service. You said it was a B to a C, I want to say?
Well, first of all, D is deemed an acceptable level of service under our transportation studies. So, pardon me?
Mark, are you able to blow the screen up at all?
Well, there they are. They're up on the screen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you can see
Thank you.
most of the intersections, existing background total for 197 Jericho Park, 197 Racetrack, the lowest is B. Then you keep going down. The other intersections are unsignalized.
Right.
So they get analyzed based on seconds of delay as opposed to the critical lane volume for signalized. And as you can see, the seconds of delay are after the slash, and the one D is 25.8 seconds of delay. I think you can go all the way to 50 seconds before your fail. Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks, Councilor Gibbs, for your presentation. Thanks for being here this evening. Have a few questions that were generated during the stakeholders meeting. First question being, I guess the stakeholders meeting was held on September 26th. And since that time, there has been a traffic study done. And that's what you're alluding to here on the board?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that has been done, had not been done at that point.
Correct.
But how have you addressed the question that was posed where it says, with only one vehicular access egress point from the property, how will emergency vehicles get to the site and how will residents leave it? And the response at that point in time was that site access will be looked at more closely as the plan and project evolve.
Right.
Is that still the case?
No, first of all, we're under review at this moment within the Park and Planning Commission. I think the answer to that question is that for 80 individual single-family homes, a single point of access is acceptable, both for circulation standpoints and for ingress and egress of emergency vehicles, as long as the point of access is approved by County Department of Permits, Inspection, and Enforcement and Department of Public Works and Transportation. And I think is that correct, Mr. Hughes? My understanding is the determination has been made that this is adequate for emergency vehicles to come in. There are subdivisions of many more lots than 80 which have a single point of access and are deemed safe.
Okay. You mentioned the width of the streets. Did you say they're going to be 50 feet wide?
When you come in, the DPI has indicated it's going to approve a section that is 22 feet of paving. So 2 11-foot wide paved travel aisles just for vehicles. That is going to be installed within a total right-of-way width of 50 feet. So you have 25 feet on either side of the center line. You have 11 feet on either side of the center line of paving, which, forgive me, but I think there's 14 more feet after that. And so DPI has not determined what they're going to want yet in those additional 14 feet, but our civil engineer is working with them on that. If you have any questions, he's certainly more than capable.
Because what I was concerned about is that with the sketch plan, basically you're condensing. You're putting your density in a smaller area. And so by doing that, do you make the streets narrower? Does everything condense down to the streets?
No, once you get on site, the street is built within a 60-foot wide right-of-way with normal section, sidewalks on both sides, the green area meets code requirements.
Okay. I may have more questions, but that's all I have right now.
Thanks again, Counselor.
Yes, sir.
Piggybacking off what Mr. Rogers stated, thanks for your time. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
No, I
for
have
having
a few
us.
more questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, Counselor, I have a few more questions for you.
Oh, right now?
Yes.
Oh, sure, sure.
Yeah. So, no rhyme, no reason, but please explain what's the relationship between the homeowners and say the property gets deeded over to Park and Planning. So what is that relationship and how does that work out?
Well, it's the public benefit conservation subdivision is a creature of statute. It's a creature of statute. It's created in the subdivision ordinance to address situations where there are deemed to be significant features that exist on the property which weren't being saved. And as a result of that, the subdivision ordinance mandates that title be held in the name of a qualifying third-party entity, which can't be the homeowners association. And I'm assuming that part of the rationale behind that is to have an entity that has experience and qualifications in owning and maintaining a significant natural feature to make sure it doesn't get impaired. And I think that's it. Although I would say, and I would expect that the homeowners would have access, to the Pecan Grove, and I would also expect that the likelihood is that there will be some type of amenity added within the Pecan Grove for people using the WB&A trail.
So to take advantage of this public benefit, what are the features that you're trying to maintain?
Well, you have to, they list a number of different types of features which qualify. So significant natural features, significant environmental features are two. If there are any existing trails that you want to maintain, that's another qualifying feature. You have to identify in your sketch plan, and let me just say that you can't just come in and use this subdivision technique. You have to file what's called a conservation sketch plan, and that goes through a very detailed analysis with staff. They get referrals from all the same agencies they get on the preliminary plan. We took ours through the Subdivision and Development Review Committee. We made changes to the plan as a result of requests by staff. And finally, the planning director certified that plan. Only after you get your conservation sketch plan certified can you proceed to file a preliminary subdivision plan using that technique. So you have to identify what you think are the conservation areas, what types of conservation areas you have which allow you to qualify to use this particular subdivision technique. So we identified the pecan groves and the significant environmental features running along the northern boundary of the property. Staff analyzed that and found, yes, they do qualify within the subdivision ordinance as areas that can allow you to use the conservation subdivision technique.
Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to figure out is why would you do that if the property's already zoned, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Minor, it's already zoned RR, correct? Mm-hmm. Which gives you a certain consideration for developing that property, given certain guidelines. Why would you switch over to the public benefit subdivision, the public benefit conservation plan?
Because I don't think anyone would want these pecan trees destroyed.
So that's what I was trying to get at. So what are some of the features that you're trying to preserve?
The
what's the
pecan trees
rationale for going?
the pecan trees are old. They were planted many years ago. There are varying theories about where they may have came from, but the theory is that no one would want to destroy them. And so and in point of fact, we had to do an analysis of the trees to determine what kind of condition they were in relative to being able to save them.
Okay. So the WB&A trail runs, kind of conjacent to the property. What is your plan as far as how are folks that are going to live in one of the 80 homes supposed to utilize the WB&A trail, if that's an option at all? So in essence, how do some of the folks from the interior section of the property utilize the WB&A?
Well, there will be sidewalks on both sides of all the interior streets. They'll be able to walk down the sidewalks to the very end where the stem comes in, and that is contiguous to the WB&A trail there. I might ask Mr. Hughes to come up and respond to that with a greater alacrity and detail than what I have from an engineering standpoint. Go ahead.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. My name is Phil Hughes. I work with Rogers Consulting out of their Largo office. And yes, all residents will have access to the WB&A trail through the access point to the south, which there will also be vehicular access for the residents that live further down the B&A trail, because there are currently houses that use that for access through that same access point. And I'm sure Park and Planning, if they take over, will also be providing trails and amenities within that area.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I actually don't have a question. Well, I have one question for you guys. How long is it going to take for your project to be finished?
That I really don't know. At this point in time, it all depends on going through the preliminary plan and then other final engineering and then construction. And a lot of it depends on, and I can't speak for Mr. Andy, but just the pace of housing sales.
Okay. So the reason why I'm asking that is, my next question is for Mr. Minor. When we're looking at the schools, so we're already at pretty much capacity at a couple of the elementary schools that are in the city. Middle schools are at 94%, and then the high school is at 83%. So if they annex here in Bowie, they're going to be going to, the children of this community will be going to Bowie schools. So what is the rate of growth, I guess, within the city of kids going to school? Because let's say it takes them 2 or 3 years. Right now, we're at 94% with the middle school. We're at 83% with the high school. and I think it's like 82 with the elementary schools. So 3 years from now, what happens when we're at 100%?
Ms. Avery, to answer your question, you have to know a little bit about the county subdivision regulations and what they call for. As part of the adequate public facilities test, the park and planning staff is supposed to keep track of developments as they've been approved each year. And what they do is the Board of Ed, or the county pupil accounting department, puts out enrollment numbers every September 30th. So every year there's a new look at what the actual enrollments are versus the capacities. And so as developments are approved by the county, the park and planning staff is annually assessing how much more development that's been added. That information is provided to the school system each year, and each year as they make their decisions about capital improvements, they look at the enrollment data, they look at the pipeline approved development, and they'll make forecasts of their own and determine when they need to bring on new facilities online, and then they put them into their budget. So it's an annual look. What happens as part of the county's APF approval when they approve a subdivision is they take account of how many units, what those pupil factors are, how many students are expected to come from that development, and they track those throughout the year. Then they turn the information over to the Board of Ed, the pupil accounting department. And so that's all handled by the county as they go through their capital improvement programming.
Yeah, okay. I guess I'm just confused then, Mr. Minor, I guess because at this point, when I'm looking at it, looking at what, you have right now, Whitehall is already, it looks like it's over capacity or it's at 100%. And there's another school that's at 100%. So, I mean, if they do, let's say it ends up being over a certain percentage, are you saying that, I guess, the city is going to accommodate them, or the county will accommodate them in another way? Like, for instance, they will bus them to other schools, or, I mean, I understand what you're saying as far as like they're going to take it into consideration, but what exactly does that really mean? I guess
Well, the analysis is done on the cluster level. So there, I think you have in the report there all of the schools that are in the Bowie cluster of schools. And so you have a certain number of elementary schools, certain number of middle schools, and Bowie High School.
Right.
And so there's some flexibility within that school system, and there is capacity in some of the schools. And so they can actually redistrict or rezone which children go to which schools to address those types of issues. That's one technique that they have. They can also build schools or make additional capital expenditures to provide capacity within the cluster. And so that's something that we don't really know exactly what they do or why they do it. It's an internal decision made by the school system and the county council every year as they approve the budget. So they're looking at the current situation, they're looking at what they are forecasting, and they're making those types of decisions. But that's all I can tell you. I don't think there's any, I think each situation is unique, and they have to address them as the needs arise.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Minor.
Thank you, gentlemen. You can sit down now.
I got one.
So I'll tell you what, let's go to the public hearing
Let me
portion.
just get one more question, that way can you explain the process from here in whether, going up the next step? So you start with the advisory planning board, you go to the city council, and then, go beyond there, and the recommendations and the weight that's held at each level.
Well, the ultimate arbiter in a preliminary subdivision plan case is the Prince George's County Planning Board. So we're here tonight. I think we're going before the mayor and council shortly before our planning board hearing in January, which is the 13th, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
January 13th. A few days before that, we're going before the mayor and council. They will make a recommendation, which will be transmitted to the planning board. Then we'll go before the Prince George's County Planning Board. the city's recommendation will be in the record. I'm assuming Mr. Minor will be there. Any folks here who wish to attend, I'm sure they'll be in attendance and voicing any of their opinions as to the application. And then the planning board renders the final decision for the county. Yes, the General Assembly delegated planning and zoning controls to each of the counties. And for purposes of subdivision, the delegation goes only to the Planning Board of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. The county council has no role in the subdivision process. So unlike, say, a detailed site plan that would go to the county council, or a rezoning or something of that nature, subdivision action stops with the planning board. Now, there is a right of appeal to the circuit court directly from the planning board, but the final administrative decision is made by the planning board after they consider input from their staff, all the various agencies that made referrals, your recommendations, and anybody who comes that day to testify. The only thing I was going to add, though, I'm sorry, sir. Yes, is that many years ago, the county council determined to initiate a school facilities surcharge. And so that put us in sort of a pay-and-go system. And I think that figure, there was an initial figure, and it's been adjusted every year. I think it must have started around 2005, and it's adjusted upward every year. And I think the number for schools now is over $16,000 a unit.
Almost 16, yeah, per unit.
Yes, sir, per unit. And the developer has to pay that number to the county at the time of issuance of each building permit. So,
Right.
So the issue is that money doesn't necessarily come back into Bowie. It goes into the county pot. And so I thank you for your clarification, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to have Mr. Gibbs explain the process and how it works from here, that in the end, Bowie really doesn't get to decide what happens in Bowie. I guess that was the point that I was just trying to ask you to explain and lead up to, and I appreciate you doing that. And just saying that in the end, at the end of the day, whatever we say here, really it's going to be what the county planning board decides in the end.
although the planning board certainly gives a very serious consideration to the recommendations of municipalities. Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer, do you have a list of speakers, please? I will ask that all the speakers that wish to be heard tonight, please, when you approach the podium, to state your name and your address. And you have a 3-minute limit, please. Try to maintain that so we can get through the speakers expeditiously. All right, looks like we have 10 speakers. Joan Glenn.
Hi, I'm Joan Glenn. I live in Saddlebrook West, 8102 Red Farm Lane. Just would like to note that in the elections over the last several years, the citizens, of Bowie have made it very clear that we're fed up with the development and the level and type of development that's been occurring within the city. And yet here we are again tonight to talk about a development close to and surrounding it within the city of Bowie. The Pecan Ridge development and potential annexation by the city of Bowie is a prime example of development that will forever change the nature of our city and its surrounds. One of the fabulous benefits of Bowie is that this city has for long been on the edge of the rural tier of Prince George's County. But that rural tier has been chipped away at for years and years and years by the development that's been occurring. And Pecan Ridge will require new roads, new utilities. If the site is annexed by the city of Bowie, it's roads that will need to have maintenance, snow removal, trash collection, all of that maintained by the city of Bowie. In addition, the site will add direct traffic directly to 11th Street. I note that the developer showed intersection analysis, but they didn't show the through traffic analysis on 11th Street, which is overcapacity on a daily basis. Furthermore, the proposed development calls for buildings and street directly against the WB&A trail. And that development will forever change the atmosphere that hikers and bikers experience as a respite from the development in this surrounds as green space in this area. And so this may seem like a fairly small development in a very small area, but the incremental development of our dwindling rural parcels is forever changing our environment and the city of Bowie setting. So I would hope that you would vote against this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Bruce Malam.
My name is Bruce Milam, and I live at 8010 Lloyd Station Road, and it's adjacent to this property to the left. And I would applaud Mr. Crusoe for leaving the pecan trees. They're just beautiful. That's a great idea, rather than plowing them all down and building a development. The issue I have is basically road access. If you drive here from 197, turn left on Racetrack, and start to turn left on Normal School, there's no safe left turn. You can't see far enough ahead to turn left safely there. And that's a real big issue right now. I've lived there for 17 years, and it's going to be a much bigger issue with the rest of these cars. Worse than that is when they start building, there'll be a lot of trucks. You know, the cement trucks, road tractors with the machines, and when they make that turn, they'll be unable to accelerate quickly, and they'll get T-boned right in that turn. And so I would ask each one of you to drive from here to that area and do a left on Normal School. I mean, look at it. I would suggest going up past Normal School and turning left back onto Lloyd Station. But when you pause there to look at turning left, you'll see what I mean. There's no safe left turn. So what we could really use is a traffic circle. That would be fantastic. But if that's not feasible, we need a safe way to make a left turn from 197, and which is where most traffic comes from to that area. As I mentioned, it's unsafe for construction vehicles, trucks, buses with kids. It's unsafe for trash trucks, you know, RVs, people living there with RVs, towing boats, going in and out. It's going to be a problem for everyone that lives in those homes. I do take an issue with the traffic study here. It's difficult to turn out there now. We have about 17 cars in the area. It's difficult to turn left out of that area from Normal School. And I could see from their planning, they have 3/4 of a trip per household at AM rush. I know that's a guideline that they use, but as you and I know, as they build around here, it gets more and more crowded. I would contend these guidelines are really low. There'll be 2 cars per household going out in the morning and the evening. So there'll be much more traffic there than what this report shows. And in this area, it's not Davisville. We do have 2-income households in most of the homes. So there's going to be a lot more traffic than that indicates. So we just really need a safe left turn coming from the 197 out Racetrack into that property. And as I mentioned before, I would ask you to drive there. And when you have a chance, drive out there, turn left, and look at it, and you'll see that you can't see ahead the oncoming traffic to turn left. It's unsafe right now, and it won't improve with this housing. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe this is Adrian Rad. Yes. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. My name's Adrian Rad, and I actually live in a property right next door to the development. And to answer your question, the pecan trees were planted by a gentleman named T.P. Thomas, and he was actually one of the founding members of the Bowie City development. He was a lawyer downtown and also a very well respected student of trees and nut trees, and so he was responsible for putting those pecans in. I just want to say 2 things. I believe that the traffic issue, as Bruce described, is going to be challenging. It is challenging right now at best. The second thing that I would like to point out is the right-of-way, though it shows that it has 50 feet, I believe that there's a difficulty because the 50 feet is very close to the Horsepen Hill Creek. And I am not sure that people are appropriately taking that into account and whether or not there is sufficient space to set offset between where the bank of that creek is and where the entrance to the property. So right now, the driveway that's there is about, I think, 15 or 20 feet wide, and that's just about all that can actually go there. So it's unclear to me how the development is going to put in a major road along with sidewalks and also have a setback for the creek. So I don't know if they're measuring it from the center of the creek or from somewhere else. So anyway, that's really the only couple of points that I want to make. The other points that I would make would sound much like, not my backyard, but I'll leave that for another time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay, looking down the list, Mr. Dustin Kuzan, please.
Good evening. My name is Dustin Kuzan. I live at 13010 Silver Maple Court in Bowie. I am here just to kind of, I guess, it's the thoughts I have kind of tie into this development, but also a lot of other developments and the way we're approaching development in the city. And what I see here is that I don't see the public benefit, and this is a conservation site plan, or I forget the term, but according to park and planning, that type of site is it's a public benefit, it's supposed to provide public benefit. So they're preserving the pecan trees, but they're also disturbing a lot of the other areas, so I don't think that's a benefit to the pecan trees. And beyond that, I don't see any other benefit for the greater community of Bowie. I do see impacts, though, and the usual traffic impacts and the schools and the public works and public safety and all that. But so when we're looking at, let's say, traffic, for example, ways that we can increase or improve traffic is instead of just looking at capacity, we could look at safety improvements. And the gentleman before me talked about making a left out of the development. And that's not currently a requirement that we put on developers, is to look at safety. And I do safety consulting for State Highway. And I do work with traffic engineers on a regular basis. And capacity and safety are two very different things. So even though we might not be asking for capacity improvements, maybe we should be asking for safety improvements. The other thing is with the bicycle trails, the WBNA is right there, as you mentioned, Michael, and we have this goal to build an arts and entertainment district in Old Bowie, and I'd love to see a connection from the trail over there. And this might be a great partial it's almost a direct shot over to 12th Street if you can have a trail extend along the river there, and then once you hit the end of this property, it becomes the electric lines, and then right after that is, I believe, a small partial of HOA property and then park and planning property, and then you hit 12th Street. So if the development here could build it, then we could then get transportation alternative money to extend it the rest of the way to Old Bowie. So there's definitely things that we could be asking for to increase the public benefit to kind of offset some of the impacts. So I think these are just things that we should have more conversation about and maybe request these things as part of the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see a Charlene, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your last name. You signed the list. Do you wish to speak? Okay. Please state your name and your address for the record.
Charlene Bierstow, 3642 Morningside Lane, Bowie, Maryland. Hi, 20-year resident, single mom, 2 kids, worked for DOD, worked for the Transportation Implementation Board as it pertains to the Council of Governments in Washington, D.C., put myself completely through school, have an environmental science degree and water quality degree from a land-grant institution. I can tell you what's in a soil profile, I can tell you what's in a water quality report, I can tell you how to use a spectrophotometer. But let me tell you what a pecan is. This is an acorn, it's not a pecan. Everyone knows what an acorn is. A pecan is longer. The neat thing about the oil in a pecan is it is directly not proportional to rain. So a special anointing means that the oil in the pecan means the oil is greater the less rain there is. The Arianic benediction asks for gentle rains on fields. What I'm here to talk about is the educational pertinence of this property, independent of the Transportation Implementation Board. If you count 4 seconds on Schoolhouse Road, you can teach your teenager how to make the left safely because that blind turn disappears if you wait. I can tell you that because I've gone on that property, I've walked it, I've rode horses on it, I have a horse that I love from it, and my children have played on it, I've had a birthday party on it. I know the topography, not only from looking at the map, but because I know how that washed out field that was not abandoned. I correct our great city planner. It was not abandoned. It was forced for the animals to get off of it. And the owner, LLC they would not name, has told the people that were using that farm with horses, sheep, goats, as well as chickens, they had to leave that farm. My daughter's tack trunk was on that farm, and it was made by a carpenter who has over 50 years of experience. Why is this important? Because I am a 20-year resident who has an affection for that farm. Prayers have been said on that farm. There is a slave house on that farm. That portion of property is going to be the greatest signal intelligence the city of Bowie ever had, and is part of a strategy that looks stealth to me. And why? Because you have a few dominoes you need to pay attention to. When a city such as this loses its airfield after a 9/11 and you allow it, you are signaling something about intelligence. When a city such as this has a huge portion of property with a horse stable, the founding principle of our city was not the railroad. It was the birthplace of horse racing. We do not need statues. We need to have significance. And for educational purposes, we need more than pecan trees. We need to use that portion of land for educating our kids in all schools, whether they're Christian or whether they're public school, what a connection to the land is. And by having kids glean off the land for pecans and having them see the tiny size of a slave house and to have them feel what it is to see horses running free alongside of deer, and for them to feel pieces of sheep wool and know what it means, is more important than 80 houses in a subdivision, and it's more important than a Parks and Planning Commission, and it's more important than the opinions of men who come and go and mothers who raise children to push them into the world and see what they learn. I ask you, with everything a mother can say, use the greatest wisdom you ever had, because this tiny Caruso home moment will show the rest of the United States why horse racing is more than gambling. It is an important component of loving animals and teaching children respect for animal care. And if we can start here, we can then use these arguments to save and ask for help in saving the horse racing facility for educational purposes and preservation. And I think that is what these gentlemen were trying to help us, whether they meant to or not, on as it pertains to the conservation sketch plan. It takes 3 hours to fill a sackcloth bag with pecans when you glean them off the land doing it by yourself. But if you have 20 kids, you can do it in less than an hour. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Fiona Moody. Good evening.
Good evening. Fiona Moody, 13205 Ithan Lane. I have multiple concerns with this development, many of which have yet to be properly addressed by the applicant. Pecan Ridge is a landlocked property with limited physical access. The two-lane road that leads to this property is not city property currently, and it's not maintained by the city of Bowie. Should this property be annexed and the homes be built, it would leave a lot of questions about the upkeep of the road, what those costs are going to be associated in terms of trash and leaf collection, snow removal, and the long-term wear and tear on our infrastructure. Also, the 11th Street intersection, as many people have already noted, is actually horrible and dangerous. I don't know if any of you have actually attempted to make the turn there, but you're taking your life into your own hands. It needs to be completely reconfigured and upgraded, as does Lloyd Station Road as a whole. The applicant's traffic survey says that the intersection can handle more traffic, but as a previous speaker noted, they're not talking about the through traffic along 11th Street Road. How many accidents have occurred there, and how many more are going to occur on this already difficult intersection? We're routinely told that roads like Route 3 and 301 can bear more traffic, yet we're seeing accident after accident on these roads as we increase development in the area, and people are losing their lives as a result. Finally, I would like to address the status of our schools in Prince George's County, and specifically Bowie. During your committee's meeting regarding South Lake, your committee noted that there is not a need for an additional school in this area, as the county finds there is capacity in local schools. This is simply not true. I'm a teacher, and while on paper bureaucrats may have arbitrarily assigned capacity to our local school systems, our schools are struggling, and overdevelopment in this area is setting our children up for failure. In the most recent assessment that just came out for our local schools, 6 Bowie schools, Bowie High School, Heather Hills Elementary, Highbridge Elementary, Rockbridge Elementary, Samuel Ogle Middle School, and Whitehall Elementary, all in proximity to this development, were downgraded in quality and lost a star. Bowie High School, you mentioned, is at 83% capacity, but this also includes the use of the Bowie Annex, which does not have potable water in the school and is dilapidated at best. Only 37% of students at Bowie High School are proficient in mathematics. Only 30% at Tasker are proficient. Only 25% are proficient at Samuel Ogle, and only 25% at Rockledge. This is not acceptable, and our students deserve better. In 2019, Prince George's County schools are already up by 4,000 students. 700 of those are elementary school students, and between now and 2027, PG County is looking at an increase of 2,200 elementary students. And as Mr. Minor mentioned, those are with the already approved development, so this is not included in this. Where are they going to go to school? Something that was addressed was redistricting. This is a widely unpopular option. It was something that was explored recently at Whitehall, and that was due to the overpopulation in elementary schools, and the option was withdrawn because parents were simply outraged that in the middle of their children's education, they were going to be shipped somewhere else because there's too much population at their student school. The quality of Prince George's County schools during this most recent assessment went down, and our neighboring Anne Arundel County saw some of the biggest increases in quality of education in the state of Maryland. And what's going to happen with all of this development all over Bowie is young families like my own are going to leave Bowie, and we're going to seek a better quality of life for our students elsewhere. Our children deserve better than what we have here in PG County. What we're seeing in Bowie is a push for quantity over quality, and these problems need to be addressed first. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up would be Jerry Plummer Walker. I'm sorry, Jenny. Sorry, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Jenny Plummer Welker. I live in Collington Ridge at 16307 Pennsbury Way. As a person that enjoys Bowie's parks and trails, should this property be developed, these property owners will have an excellent opportunity to have access to the WB&A trail. And when the bridge is constructed over the Patuxent River, even a greater opportunity to take use of the trail. My concern is about the design of the subdivision with the cul-de-sacs. There are sidewalks provided, but what if a young family with young children and teenagers lives in the lot that's furthest out? They're going to have to drive that Street A all the way to the stem to access the WB&A trail. The justification, the First Amendment statement of justification mentioned, there's many parcels that are to be identified. The H parcel on the northern boundary was mentioned as potential for a trail. I would like to suggest that the trails also be considered for the southern portion to provide direct access. Separating the young children and teenagers from the street, it would be much safer. So it would also line up with the Prince George's County and the state of Maryland's Vision Zero about reducing the number of fatalities between pedestrians and vehicles and vehicle deaths to zero. So that's my comments for this evening, is to consider in the design actually the trail system.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. And I have written comments that I've provided to the planning director.
Yes, please, if you turn them in to Mr. Minor.
Yes.
I have a question about the power lines.
Ma'am, you want to get all the participants first, all right? John Illig, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Good evening. I usually try not to speak at events like that, but it doesn't seem like there's too many people left in the city who recognize my last name, so I guess
If you could state it, please, for the record and your address.
13005 12th Street.
Thank you, sir.
I find it, I know Caruso was up here a minute ago talking about how their roots run deep in Prince George's County. Well, I know I went to public school here, but my family's been here for about 118 years. So we've been here just about longer than anybody else. I'm a fourth-generation farmer, and I'm proud of that. But is this packet that we got sitting on the table, is this an official stance from the city as far as their comments?
That's correct.
Okay, so let's go through here. Let's see, adequate public facilities. Comment, prior to site development, water and sewer line, extensions and all related water and sewer structures, et cetera, required to be approved by Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission. Has WSSC approved anything? No, because it's a preliminary sketch, correct? Nobody's done anything. Police facilities, that's satisfied. Schools, doesn't matter what Mr. Minor says up there while he's speaking, because as far as I'm concerned, you can't trust what a man says, you can only trust what's written on paper. It says right here, $16,371 per dwelling unit. He doesn't care anything about that. That's his stance. He wants the money, $16,371. He doesn't care if we send Timmy in there and he's got room to sit down or not. He got his money. Let's move on here. Traffic impacts. Staff reviewed the traffic analysis. Will not lower levels of service and respective intersections studied below acceptable standards, blah, 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 trip cap. What I'm getting at here is they've been here 4 times. And every time out of the 4 times we've asked these questions and they've come back with the same answer. In the future, we will address that. So to me, that means they've done no homework and they know nothing. Say I'm a builder and I want to build you a house and I come to you and I'll say, we'll figure that out along the way. Does that make you feel comfortable? If you say, I want you to build a house for me, what are we going to do about water and sewer? I'm not sure about that. We'll figure that out along the way. Well, what are we going to do about street? Well, we'll figure that out. Don't worry about it. Does that make you feel comfortable?
Understand that this is the second step, so after this step would also come a detailed site plan, in which I think a lot of those questions should be addressed.
Here's my other issue with that. They don't have to go through the city of Bowie to do this, correct?
That's correct.
They can do this, okay. My whole stance is from a business standpoint, if they knew this was going to work, and why are they stuck on the city of Bowie to approve this? If they really wanted their money and they wanted to go, they would have gone. They're waiting on something from you guys, and either they don't know.
There's 2 other pieces of land in the big box picture.
I'm sorry?
There's other parcels of land that if the banks see they can get this with this outside of the city with land use and woodlands, they can then have a tip to the hat for the racetrack, and our airfield is part of a big signal intelligence. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, there you go.
Yeah, that's all speculation. Please finish with your statement, sir.
Okay. Lost it now. I got side. She got. But anyways, you know, this makes me really unsure, and I think the city of Bowie, and this has been in one of these meetings once before, where it's putting the cart before the horse, and I feel like the city of Bowie, in their best interest, should wait and see what materializes. Because the last time I was here, I think I remember one of them saying that Park and Planning, they're going to approve us next week. Well, that was back in September. And you can check and listen to the meeting, but I'm pretty sure I heard something like along the lines of that. Oh, we're set to be approved next week. Well, I just heard them say a minute ago, well, we're expected to be approved whenever. So I feel like they're not they're not doing their homework on this, and they're just kind of waiting for you guys to make their decision for them.
All right, sir. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Is there anyone else who cares to speak but didn't have the chance to sign up?
Yeah.
Please state your name and your address for the record, ma'am.
It's Gwendolyn Morgan, 8504 Normal School Road. I actually have listened to everyone that has spoken, and it's a lot about the traffic and making the left turn and blah, blah this and blah, blah. But nobody's saying anything about, Caruso is working on something, because I'm the one that owns the property that's kind of blocking it. So I will work with them with whatever area they need it, so that they'll be able to open the roads up, because I'm on like a diamond-shaped piece of land just sitting in the middle of nowhere. I'm not opposed to it. I mean, you know, people have to live somewhere. And so I've been 11 and a half years, but if it would help with other things, then I would be willing to work with them.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay.
All right. At this time, the public hearing is now closed. Any questions for staff and/or the applicant?
I'd just like to make a point of clarification that something that the representatives explained earlier. Perhaps there's a lack of understanding on the process and how it's done. So basically, the way that this is set up is they come to us, Advisory Planning Board, then they go to the City Council, and then they move on to Park and Planning, and they don't have to go to the County Council. And when that process was explained earlier, perhaps it wasn't understood, and so perhaps there could be a better education process on that. That's why I asked the question earlier, for them to elaborate and explain the process. We can vote 4-0 today to approve it. We can vote 4-0 today to deny it. Quite frankly, it's almost irrelevant. It's out of a courtesy that they come to us because they want to look to get annexed in to the city. Naturally, that can be decided by the city whether they're annexed in or not. So that would mean additional tax dollars for the city, but at what cost? In other words, is that juice worth the squeeze? And I think that's what folks are speaking against tonight, that juice, in fact, is not worth the squeeze. And so, like I said, however we vote here this evening, it's really irrelevant, as that decision is finally made by the Park and Planning Commission. So regardless of what we talk about here tonight and decide, regardless of what the City Council talks about, or if they want to postpone it for a month, they can do that. At the end, Park and Planning is going to make their recommendation for what they want to recommend or not recommend. And I just want to make sure that's clear and understood by everybody. Thank you.
Ms. Avery.
I'd also like to make a comment, and this goes back to the schools. Every time we do have a developer, they come in and they do say that there's a certain amount of money that's being provided to the county for each unit, and everyone says that, we never see it. But I'm wondering why the city or the developer, for that matter, has anyone ever done like a study as to where that money actually goes, and has it actually been used for city schools? I mean, I don't want to make an assumption, but I don't know whether it actually gets used, like you were saying,
So
Carl.
it doesn't always. So for example, they play 16,000 per dwelling unit, right, times 80, so we can all do the math there. That money doesn't necessarily come back into, like for example, maybe that could pay for an elementary school, right, in that area perhaps. But that's not how it works. The money goes into a general fund. Okay, the money goes into a general fund for the county. For example, Laurel, let's say Incorporated Laurel, they, add something like this, right, in Laurel area. And so that doesn't mean that money goes into Laurel. We can get some of that money from their development. So perhaps that's not the best way to do business, but unfortunately that's the way it's set up right now. So it's not whatever's paid into Bowie stays in Bowie. That's not how it works. It goes into a general fund. Okay, that's how it works. And so ideally that money would come back into Bowie directly, and we would be able to, see the fruits of the labor. But that's unfortunately just not how it works.
Right, and so I'm wondering, I guess, and I'm just making a comment, if we are actually allowing ourselves to grow, we're growing a subdivision, but are we allowing families to come in to existing homes and existing communities and actually have children and raise those children and be able to put them in schools that are not overcrowded? Essentially, people come here because, we're considered more or less a county seat, right? People like Bowie schools, they like the area, and they should have an expectation that they're going to be able to get what they're paying for. So I don't know if, if we're allowing ourselves when we're developing to actually grow as a city. Are we taking slots away from existing houses or communities?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Avery. Barring no other further questions, I'm open for a motion. Tick, tick, tick.
I have a question.
Sorry, ma'am, the public hearing is closed now.
Today, I told you before you heard the graveling that I had questions, and they are pertinent to this conversation. Questions are different from statements, and I was allowed to make my statement, but I wasn't allowed to make my questions.
I'm sorry. Sorry, ma'am, public hearing is closed.
Can I ask a question about, who would I ask a question about the conservation sketch plan? Mr. Beard, pardon me. Could you direct me where I would talk to someone about creating a conservation sketch plan suggestion?
Mr. Joe Minor with the Planning Department.
He said something that I did not think was true or correct. Where would I go? Who's the representative for that parcel of land on the council?
Ma'am, you probably take that up with Park and Plan. That's another avenue you can probably address as well.
But who's the council person in response to that parcel for this city of Bowie?
No, there's no city. It's not in the incorporated section of Bowie at this time, so it doesn't fall.
The land use issues for zoning are up by Upper Marlboro? There are mistakes in this report. You have not, the conservation, woodland conservation suggestion as a mistake. You didn't put the secondary line there, what your proportion was. You can't have an offset for whole growth trees. Those are over 100 years old. You know it. Gonna put some benches? You gotta be kidding me. No, I will not. Well, then get closer. You can walk. Blessed are you.
Mr. Chairman, the board needs to make their discussion on the record. On the record, it can't. The board members can't sit there and have a discussion in the middle of the case.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Minor.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So, Mr. Rogers, your point was that that the recommendation meets adequate public facilities test.
What my thought is that given the criteria by which the city staff conducted their analysis in the areas of the adequate public facilities test, the 1, 2, 3 areas there, water, sewer facilities, the criteria is satisfied. Police facilities, the criteria is satisfied. Fire and rescue, the criteria is satisfied. Schools facilities, according to the data that's available, it says the criterion will be satisfied upon payment of the school facility surcharge. We move on to the traffic impacts. It says that the 4 respective intersections studied below are at acceptable standards. I would have a question of staff as to how were those intersections selected as the only intersections and the only roads by which the traffic study was conducted on.
Mr. Rogers, there's a step that precedes the filing of a traffic study. It's called the scoping agreement. And Park and Planning is involved in that, and they will typically talk to the applicant's consultant and try to figure out the most effective way to analyze the traffic, and those intersections are then agreed upon in writing, and then the applicant is given the go-ahead to do the study. So it's done in conjunction with Park and Planning staff.
Does the city have any input into or any say in determining what intersections or what streets or arteries are that we feel that are important within our boundaries?
When the subdivision is located within the city limits, we are asked for our input on that. We were not asked that in this case.
Thank you. Stormwater management concept has not been approved because it has not been reviewed by WSSC. The Woodland Conservation Plan, it says that the criterion has been satisfied, and the conformance with the Area Master Plan, the project is in conformance. So if those are the criteria by which the city staff was required to analyze the project against, and those criterion have been satisfied, what measurements are we using to say that we object to those, to the study that the city has done? Or, I mean, that would be our thing, to just say that we disagree with staff's report, or do we disagree with the way staff conducted their analysis?
No. Mr. Rogers, I'm not saying that I disagree with the staff's report. I think the staff did a thorough job, and I agree with most of the staff's report. I'm just stuck with the schools because of the fact that we are talking about the city of Bowie schools, and this is concentrating on the county schools. And so we don't know whether or not they're going to be annexed to the city. And if they are annexed, then that is going to have a whole new set of issues that will affect the city.
It's going to impact our schools whether they annex in or not, because they're still going to have to go to those schools that there are no Pecan Ridge schools to go to. So they are going to have to go to the schools that are identified in cluster area 4.
Mr. Monty, can you shed any light on the thought of annexation?
Well, the council has discussed it twice with the applicant. The council in the last meeting gave the go-ahead to discuss and start working towards an annexation agreement as part of the review of the preliminary plan. We haven't had any real discussions beyond that. No documents have been drawn up or anything like that. And I wanted to say on the subject of schools, I think Mr. Rogers, Vice Chair Rogers, is exactly right, that the county controls all of the schools, whether they're in the city or out of the city. So the annexation really wouldn't make a difference as with respect to the school situation.
The staff report, I think, is spot on, as usual. This, you know, they're tasked with a job, and they've completed that job. I think our job is to listen to the people. And what did the people come in and tell us tonight? I count, what, 9 speakers? And I think almost all, maybe except one, said no. Ma'am. Ma'am. So.
Ma'am, please.
You're our council, right? You guys work for the citizens? We just
No, we're volunteers. You don't vote for us. That's the city council. Let's make sure. I'm going to stop acknowledging you. So we have 9 people that came out to speak, right? And 8 of them, you know, almost emphatically said no. And then the last lady, Miss Morgan, mentioned that she lives on Normal School Road. Ma'am, are you going to continue to interrupt? Please. We respected your time. Can you respect ours? It's that simple.
My time was not respected. Thank you.
It was. Nobody interrupted you.
My questions are not addressed.
Thank you. 8 people spoke, and so they said no. So what are we tasked to do here, right? On paper, it looks good. The reality is, whatever we decide tonight is irrelevant. It's going to go to, and with all due respect, and you know, we appreciate their respect in coming here and meeting with us and before us, and they're just doing their due diligence, right? But at the end of the day, it's the planning board who decides, not us. But who do we represent? For me, we represent the people. Well, and I'm leaning towards with the people.
And I agree with that. That, I mean, our job is to basically to make a recommendation to the city council. Okay, so what happens here today is our recommendation to the city council, and at that point in time, this is called the Bowie Planning Advisory Board. We are advisory to the city council, and the city council could very well, you know, not agree with us. So that is also part of the process.
Okay, once again, I call for a motion, please.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion. Based on the criteria by which the staff conducted their analysis, I will say that I have some concern, before I make the motion, I'll say that I do have some concern about some of the open issues and some of the open questions. First question that I have concern about is the fact that we don't know where we are in the annexation process. Whether or not that is a serious discussion that's going on, that's taking place, and whether or not it's going to bear any fruit that is, you know, that they're going to annex into the city. We don't know where they are. Second thing is, Caruso, as council mentioned, is not the owner of this property right now. We don't know that they're even going to become the owner of the property. So that's still something that is up in the air. This is a preliminary plan of subdivision. This is the point in time where questions basically need to be addressed, because once it passes the preliminary plan, or, you know, gets approval for preliminary plan, then we're pretty much, you know, looking at a horse that has left the barn. You know, we go to detailed site plan and we start looking at other, you know, selecting brick colors and things like that. So having said that, we do have to be very mindful of the decisions that we make here in the preliminary stage of reviewing this project. And I would like to see that there be more, that there be less questions, less open issues for us to, look at, because as some of the citizens mentioned, what happens when we're told that, well, we'll figure that out as we go through the process. Well, actually, that needs to be determined now. Some of the open questions, and the most pertinent ones are, who is the owner of the property? And what was the other issue? Who's the owner of the property? And annexation. Okay, once we have a better feel for that, maybe we can have another discussion. But if they don't annex into Bowie, we're still going to be faced with having the issues that everyone is concerned about. Okay, those issues don't go away. Kids are going to still have to go to school someplace. We're still going to have to provide some level of city services to them. They're going to use our streets, and Bowie will then get no benefit of any of the taxes that are raised. So we'll have the problems, but we won't have any of the benefit of the taxes that would be paid into the city should they choose not to annex. So that's the situation that we have. So having said that, in terms of a motion, in the matter of the Pecan Ridge preliminary plan of subdivision 4-19003, docket 1911, this preliminary plan of subdivision, I find that the city staff has done a good job of evaluating the criteria of adequate public facilities, and that criteria has been met. The police facilities, the criterion has been met. The fire and rescue facilities requirement has been satisfied. I'm not very comfortable about the school facilities test. That criterion will be satisfied, but that's one issue out of at least 8. The traffic impacts have been adequate, their studies show acceptable standards. And the woodland conservation plan has been satisfied, and the project is in conformance with the area master plan. So given the fact that those issues the city has told us have been satisfied, I recommend that we adopt or we accept the city's recommendation for approval of the subdivision.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Rogers for approval of the preliminary plan of subdivision 14-19003. Do I have a second?
This is a very hard second because, yes, the city has proven that, all of the criteria has been met and and it has adequately passed the public facilities test. But that being said, is adequate enough? I will second because the criteria has been met. However,
He lied. I stand on.
It's your last one, ma'am.
however, I think that, we have to have these discussions and we have to have more of them because of the fact that, it's adequate. But in the end, is it really benefiting us, as a city? So, I second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for approval by Mr. Rogers, seconded by Ms. Avery. Any more discussion? Mr. Shetler?
Nay.
All right, so there's a vote. One nay.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
3-1 for approval. Thank you.
Adequate's not good enough for our children. It really isn't. You should get the land for environmental and education purposes.
Next item on the agenda.
Shame on you guys. Teaching children what's on the land is so important.
All right, moving on to the next topic.
Here's some softball.
Approval.
Would you like to wear it?
Okay.
My righteousness walk. Would you like to borrow it?
Approval of the minutes for November 12th, 2019. Those were pleasant.
Move to accept as written?
There was a problem in that last.
Move to accept as written for the minutes of November 12th.
So moved.
There's a problem.
Is there a second?
Minutes for April 26, 2019.
November.
I'm
Move
sorry.
to approve November 26th written, approve is written for November 26th. Joe, can we get her out of here, please?
Because they would not allow questioning.
Move to accept the minutes as written, please.
All right.
They would not take questions.
Terry,
I
can you second?
abstain, I misspoke.
Second.
I know you're still in the middle.
Approval for minutes.
Adequate's not good enough for our children. It really isn't. I just got
Yeah.
married. I have grown up.
We'll talk afterwards, Fiona, please. Please stand by. We'll talk afterwards, please.
That's what we're always
Joe, anything coming up in the pipeline?
like the whole committee.
So let's,
All right, at this point, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Transfer of development.
Did you approve the minutes of the 26th?
Yes, I motion to move to approve the 12th and the 26th, second by Mr. Rogers.
The mayor wasn't yet a sitting mayor, so I say you cannot approve those until he approves.
We're going to do what
All
you
right,
say.
at this,
Motion to
We're going to do
adjourn.
what you say.
at this time, it's 1:45. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Yes, move to adjourn,
move
please.
to adjourn.
All right, so moved. Thank you.
So,
Huh? Fiona.